In the dance of our conversation where wisdom meets wonder, we pause to acknowledge the spark behind today's enlightened episode, Keith's Cacao, a key to unlocking your inner magic. Have you ever felt a hidden reservoir of creativity, focus, and energy within you, just waiting to be unleashed? This insight is shared with you by Keith's Cacao. Imagine a cup of pure, ceremonial-grade cacao as your companion to unlocking that door. Harvested from sacred mountain rainforests of Guatemala, Keith's Cacao isn't just any cacao. It's a gateway to clarity and heightened creativity. Whether you're crafting your next masterpiece or seeking balance in the hustle, let Keith's Cacao guide you. Discover more at riseinterversity.com/sponsors and embrace your transformation. Unleash your inner magic with Keith's Cacao.
Welcome to the crossroads of dreams and wisdom, where ambition dances with the soul. You're listening to The Balanced Visionary, aligning ambition with soulful success. I'm Jen, your guide on this journey of self-discovery and achievement. Each week we'll explore the paths of personal growth, spiritual depth, and professional triumphs. Together, we'll unearth the secret to a life where success is not just what we achieve, but how we thrive. So visionaries, are you ready to transform your ambitions into a journey of the heart? Let's embark on this adventure together. Hello guys, welcome back to another episode of The Balanced Visionary with your host, Jennifer Nunez. I do want to say from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate everyone who is tuning in, liking, subscribing, and sharing the show out. That means the absolute world to me, and I really do hope that you are benefiting from the information that I am bringing to you from our amazing guest. Now, we have another amazing guest in the house, and before I introduce them, I want to get out of the way some housekeeping items. First and foremost, you guys know what to do. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow, and share the show out. Drop that comment, send me a message, and let me know what's going on with you and how I can help you. Second, take advantage of the show sponsors. That is how we monetize here at The Balanced Visionary and Rise University. These are tested products that have absolutely changed my life that I want to be able to share with you. So pop on over to riseinterversity.com/sponsors. Now, coming this July, for some of you who know me, I own a digital agency, Unity Work Agency, where I offer consulting to visionaries who have so much to offer the world. They may not know how to package it, offer it digitally online, do a website, that type of thing. Now, in July, Unity Works Agency will be going through a price structure, and some prices will be raised on certain services that are being offered. So if you get in before July, or you've been sitting on a project and you want to get it done, make sure you take advantage of this, because most of the people who get in before July will be grandfathered in. So if you want more information on that, check the links down below and you'll be able to find Unity Works Agency, and let me see how I can help you. Third thing, Rise University is going to be going over a makeover, okay? So you may notice some things being there or going away or changing. If you are a member of Rise University, don't worry, your membership's still going to be okay. It's still going to be offered at the same value. I'm just making some tweaks to help bring balance into my life. Now that I've gotten all that out of the way, let's get started with today's show. All right, guys, today I am thrilled to welcome a guest whose life work epitomizes the fusion of spiritual depth and professional excellence. It's an honor to be able to bring this man on, Dr. David Pilz, also known as the Oracle and Whitestar. Some of you guys may know him on Facebook. But David began his metaphysical journey at a young age, mentored by his ancestral teacher, Oma. I hope I said the name correctly, and shaped by diverse culture and spiritual experiences. His profound encounters from a near-death experience to transformative ceremonies have not only deepened his understanding of the universe, but have also equipped him with insights that challenge the conventional boundaries of the metaphysical and the mundane. Dr. Pilz is an international recognized metaphysical instructor, a certified master healer, an ordained minister, and an author. He passionately believes in the potential within each of us to tap into our psychic abilities, a potential he describes as a muscle that can be developed and honed in. Through his metaphysical development certificate program and various dynamic workshops and books, David has dedicated his life to empowering others to explore and expand their spiritual and intuitive capacities. David, it's an honor to have you on the show. Welcome.
Oh my goodness. I'm listening to you and half of all that stuff is coming out. I'm going, is she talking about me? That sounds like an amazing guy, really. So, it's interesting because you don't often get an opportunity to meet yourself, do you? Right? We go through life, and of course, I hear lots of things, mirrored back at me from people that I meet and I connect with, just like all of us do. But, how often do we actually get a chance to meet ourselves? And so listening to you, read off, portions of my bio and stuff like that, I'm anchoring into my own journey and realizing, holy cow, this guy's doing something.
Thank you for saying that. You and I've had other guests say that to me as well. And I cyber stalk you guys before I get you on the show. I pull your information and I spit out the things that I see. And that's one of the gifts that I have in this world, is showing people their brilliance. And you're right. This is why I love having profound guests on here, because just like me, I don't always see it. You may not always see it. So we're kind of giving that to each other. So thank you.
You're so welcome. Oma. Oma is actually European for grandma. So for the first at least 5 years of my life, I spent majority of my time with my Oma, my grandmother, who recognized that I was just this generation's, I don't even know what you want to call it. Like the gift dates back in the family to the 1300s. They're writing about our family and such in Lithuania and those parts, So when I was born, she just, took one look at me and went, oh, okay, it's him, and tucked me under her wing because, being born metaphysically aware isn't comfortable, landing on this planet, for so many reasons, so many different levels, even just the dynamic of stepping into a room and being able to perceive and read so much more than, even adults can, but, try and filter through all that stuff as a kid, right? It's very interesting. These gifts, if you want to use that term now, certainly weren't as a child, growing up. I really had to come to, and I'm sure there are so many kids out there, ADD, ADHD, spectrum, etc., who would understand exactly what I'm talking about, But of course, this has been going on in my family tree, for way longer than even, the autism and the ADHD and all that stuff started to show up later on, right? And so, I can't honor her enough. And, I hope I've done my children the service of also helping them understand, they've showed up with something that is it's funny because years, and we're talking years later, I worked with a guy by the name of Morris Friedman. Morris Friedman is the foremost neurologist on the planet, actually. If you're a brain surgeon, you've read his textbooks, you'll probably recognize his name. And when I was a kid, I read his stuff because he was explaining to me what's going on inside my head logistically. Like he mapped it all out. DHEA and hypothalamus, pineal, pituitary. He taught me a language, to help me understand what muscles that were going on inside of my brain. I was looking for that psychic muscle. I mean, the closest I found is maybe a pineal pituitary combination, a little bit of hypothalamus. Right. It's all this alchemy, right? For sure. And, but I did have the opportunity years later of working with this guy. Actually, he showed up on one of my retreats, cruises, call it whatever you want. And
that's so awesome.
It was so amazing. He shows up, and this is kind of a cool story. I like telling it. He shows up on my cruise. He'd had so much showing up in his practice for about 10 years. He had these patients showing up that had experienced the ability, psychokinesis, the ability to move objects with your mind. Okay. And interestingly enough, this showed up after they'd received some damage to their frontal lobe, be it sporting accidents or car accidents or what have you, right? And all of a sudden they can move stuff. And so they always sent them to him because nobody knows what's really going on. And just so you know, your audience, this is not a metaphysical development technique that I recommend. Okay, don't be taking a baseball bat to your forehead. Okay, so anyway, he had all these anomalies showing up, and my name kept on showing up in University of Toronto and Ryan University and Centrepoint. And I'm one of those guys who, all the scientists who are involved in metaphysics kind of know me, even corner remote viewers, all that stuff. They all know who I am. And I'm one of those guys who's, curious enough to be a guinea pig. And I speak the language, and I understand how science actually works too, right? And I can appreciate we're talking about balancing here today on your show. And you know what? The mind and being able to actually have this hard evidence for yourself is such an important, in my world anyway, it's such an important part of balancing, even far more than, the cliche of got to be grounded and, and all this stuff. You know what? Well, let's just see some empirical evidence and see what that looks like and see how I can chew on that and how it fits into my weird stuff, right? There's so much going on out there in the universe that we tap into, we cannot prove. It's so nice to be able to have this mountain of empirical evidence that you can, right? Yeah. So anyway, he shows up on my cruise. He wanted to work with me, but he was afraid of working with some weird guy who ran around calling himself the Oracle, and I don't blame him for one bit, right? So he stalked me a little bit and found out we were offering this cruise. He talked to our cruise agent, asked her, is it possible for me to buy the cruise? Because, we're actually selling it cheap because we've got group, buying power, right? And so he says, can we show up on the cruise? And if we don't like him, can we just ignore him? And of course, our agent was like, yeah, sure, why not? And so it took the guy 4 days to actually stick out his hand and, introduce himself. And when he did introduce himself, he showed up. That afternoon, we're going to do a landed excursion, and we're going to go and hang out with some dolphins, actually. And so in the morning, I was teaching the workshop of telepathy, how to literally read minds and connect in that way. Because if you're going to go swimming with dolphins, you got to have at least a rudimentary understanding of telepathy, because that's how they talk, right? So, for sure. And so this guy shows up, sticks out his hand and says, hi, my name is Morris Friedman, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's funny. It reminds me of a guy who wrote a book, and I named off a few that, again, as a kid, I'd almost memorized, right? 9-10-year-old kid pulling out textbooks. Yeah, what I'm saying? The librarian was suspicious at first, but after a while she leaned in and realized that I was actually learning stuff, right? For sure. And
well, it's not common for a child that age to be diving into that topic or, area of study.
More. I couldn't agree more, but I was authentically looking for the answers in those books. As hey, I did Sunday school and I did some, Hermetic teachings, and I've really authentically been looking my entire life, right? I found some answers, not all of them, which is exciting because it just means the adventure continues, right? So what's so cool is he sticks out his hand, he says his name. I'm like, haha, isn't that funny? And then in a few seconds later, I realize it's actually him. Yeah, and this is like, oh, it's like Elvis showed up, right? For sure. And so him and I disappeared into our own little world, and the workshop had to be taught on the bus on the way. And it was so exciting for me, for that to come around full circle. And So, I share that with you again because it's about balance, right? It's about being able to left and right brain. It's about, all of that in our world, right? So, when it's interesting. I mean, you asked me to come on and I didn't really understand, what the topic du jour was going to be. And when you talked about balance and that I might know a few things about it, I'm like, oh my goodness, do I, right? So just being born metaphysically connected, if you like. I mean, Morris Friedman basically told me I'm born without filters. Everybody receives all the same information I do, but it's on a subconscious level and it's put through filters on what they can access and what they cannot, right? So, when I'm teaching my students how to see auras, I'm not handing them a magic pill or a potion. I'm actually just rewiring their brain to get out of their own way. Does it make sense?
Yes.
And so everybody is gifted. Everybody is psychic. But there are these filters that are in place. There's these blocks in place. Some of them are literally neurological, physiological, right? But some of them are actually psychological and, of course, sociological as well, right? So we have to, when we're dealing about metaphysical awareness or metaphysical development or even this awakening protocol we all keep hearing about, it's the shadow work. It's that darkness within ourselves. It's the ignorance within ourselves that is so difficult to address. And I mean, what I mean by ignorance, I don't even mean arrogance and attitude. I mean, we just don't know the right information, right? And so to get past that cognitive dissonance, to get into that space of even just being able to receive some information, we have to be gentle with ourselves, never mind anybody else presenting it to us, right? It's too quick that walls go up. And I do men's work on a regular basis. Actually, I run a regular men's group myself, and I participate wherever I can. And shadow work is common there. It's actually interesting because when I'm working with men, it's kind of, maybe it's just man-to-man thing. It's kind of how we do it. But I'm able to call so many men on their shadows. Let's call them on their BS, if you like, in the moment, at the moment. And as long as there's a safe space, anything goes. I can say anything to these men, and they're just going to respond and reciprocate and participate in that process. It's fascinating. And so it's not even just about doing work. It's just, there's so many different directions that we have to look here. And I guess if not, maybe we should talk about medicine wheel, because of course medicine wheel is about that, right? So,
Yeah, well, that's kind of how it all brought together, because before I was even, higher guidance and spirit was leading me into that, having that balance in my life. And it's not just one area, it's all four areas for you to be in the center to really have that clarity. And I want to touch, before we dive into that, I want to touch on to something that I've had that epiphany recently about the arrogance. Every time I think I know something, spirit always tells me that I don't know shit. I know it at that level of awareness that I had in that moment. But even if I know that, something happens to bring in a higher awareness that I'm like, oh, that's a different angle. That I didn't see it that way. I didn't look at it. And so it has allowed me, going through my journey and breaking through my cognitive dissonance and doing my shadow work, to keep that in mind about the arrogance. Because Americans, I know you're in Canada, but us Americans, we are stuck in our ways. We can be arrogant and we think we know certain things when we really don't, and be convicted in that arrogance too sometimes, which
actually,
can throw us off balance.
And I can appreciate that, but I mean, there's even a book out there, I think it's called The Arrogant American, kind of an idea, right? But I mean, again, there's a difference between ignorance and arrogance, right?
Yes.
For sure, right? Arrogance is attitude, right? It's about how are you dealing with this new information coming in, right? For sure. It's interesting. I've had these conversations. Of course, we're neighbors, so I mean, I get often asked about my relationship with our Americans to the south, right? And it's interesting because I guess one of the differences is that an American if you come close to their boundary, they're very clear in, hey, you're getting pretty close to my boundary, right? You know, but they're also going to be willing to maybe negotiate that line a little bit. Does that make sense? You know, because this is maybe counter to what maybe people think about Americans is that they're going to draw a line in the sand. But even if you step across that line, they're going to go, hey, wait a minute, buddy. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, and so there's this opportunity to engage. They see people as individuals and unique because they pride themselves in that themselves, right? You know, I am special and I am important. So therefore, so are you, right? Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, it's this interesting dynamic as humans love themselves more, they can share that more. Do you understand? Right? They're not in a place of having to fulfill their own needs. They can also see that in others, right? You know? And so I love that about my American friends is that there's that dynamic that can take place. They can see you as unique and an individual. And you can show up and shine your bright light. And they're like, yeah, you go. Right? You know? Whereas Canadians, once we have a line in the sand, if you cross it, we'll shoot your toe off. Right? You know what I'm saying? We're actually much more stubborn when it comes to, you know, those dynamics. We don't necessarily see people as much of a unique individual as we're almost a little bit more socialistic in the sense that, you know, there's definitely this communal perspective of people that holds a little bit more sway than just the individual and uniqueness that each of us brings to the table. Right? And so I understand what you're saying, and you're right. It's this common dynamic and perspective that Americans are built this way. But when you actually look at it and chew on it a little deeper, there's actually something more going on there, obviously, right? So, you know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you know, totally. Just, yeah, I love sociology, obviously, and the dynamics of people, you know, for sure.
Oh, I love what is studying human behavior and why we tick the way that we do. And I guess that's why I dive so much into like history and stuff like that. But you touched on the medicine wheel, so let's dive into that.
Well, I mean, true whole medicine wheel teachings takes, you know, years ultimately, but the whole premise of it is that, you know, each of the four directions basically stands up for something and represents something in our world. And if you have one of those directions that's not working properly, then you have a flat tire. Right. Correct. And so for the medicine wheel to spin, for the circle to be complete, you have to address and direct each one of those directions. Right. I'll break it down as a very paraphrased example here. I also want to share that I've learned and we talk about learning new things. In 2023, early 2023, I had an opportunity to go down and spend some time with chiefs and elders of Toltec and the Maya and the Aztecs and some Sun Dance chiefs and some Moon Dance chiefs and our chieftesses, I guess. And it's interesting because when I was in the sacred circle there and they would, you know, call it a medicine wheel, it looked different than what I was seeing up here in Canada and in so many other places around the world. And it's interesting it's interesting because for so many times and so often, I had seen it show up in this medicine wheel version, and I immediately went to, well, that's incorrect because it's not my teachings. It's not how I received it. It's different, therefore wrong. Does it make sense? Okay, you know? And for years, I mean, I've been doing lodge ceremonies, and I'm a pipe carrier. You know what I'm saying? I've received these teachings most of my life. And so for me, it's a very specific way. And so to see it show up in a different way kind of took me back, and especially to see it show up in a different way from these people who I know way more than I do about it. Right? You know? And so I asked the question, oh my goodness, I dared to ask, right? You know, and you know, dared to ask with the ideology of receiving, you know what I'm saying? And potentially correcting what it is that I think I know about stuff, right? You know? And I was told very clearly and shown, you know, by a couple of different elders that, well, the closer you get to the equator, the wheel turns just a little different. Yeah, you know, and so, and that's just, you know, the gist of it. There's way deeper teachings attached to that, right? So, you know, but, and I guess I just wanted to share that story so that everybody who's listening understands that, one, I'm sharing my perspective and how I've learned it and anchored into it, because that's all I really have, right? You know, for sure. But knowing that even while I'm sharing it with such certainty, and such, I mean, I truly believe that, this is kind of the way it is, knowing that already there are different perspectives out there that are as legitimate, maybe even more so, right? And so this dynamic of learning new stuff, maybe one of the things we have to learn is there's no such thing as right or wrong, right?
Yes.
Maybe it just boils right down to that first and foremost. Everything that we know is right and wrong, right, at the same time, and everything new that you get presented with is right and wrong simultaneously, right? I think one of the places we get caught up in as humans is getting stuck in that space of judgment, right? For sure. And
judgment on ourselves.
Totally.
Is where it comes in. Like, as well with the mind, when you start, I'm reading a book right now. It's called The Untethered Soul. And he was giving an example of your roommate in your head. Just observe yourself when someone comes up to you. What does that roommate start to say? Most of the time it's judgmental, like, oh, I like this person. I can't, she just is the greatest, da, 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 da. Or if you don't like them, then your head starts giving a whole reason of why. So you're in this judgmental mode, but you are actually judging a thought, a perception, a belief system that was given to you at a point in time, which then starts to increase that judgment conversation that you have in your head. Does that make sense?
Completely agree. Yeah, totally. Completely agree. Yeah, that's just, that's a whole...
I love to observe what goes on up here. It's so crazy.
That's a whole rabbit hole, that one, totally. And I love it. All right, so let's talk about medicine wheel. Medicine wheel typically starts in the east. Its color is predominantly yellow if you're drawing the circles themselves. And again, typically and predominantly, as I've received these teachings, it means new beginnings, fresh starts, the youth, right? And this is where we get that inspiration and that passion for these new ideas, these new concepts. Everything, including, the phone and the screen that you're looking on, came because at one point in time, someone had this aha moment, this inspiration. And that happens in every project, every thought, every act, every deed in our world. There is this beginning, right? And so the first direction is the east, and it honors that new beginning and that fresh start, right? And its element is fire, and there's so many different offshoots. This can even, the medicine wheel and the elements also step into archetypes, right? Which can also work within things like tarot cards even. And it's just powerful how this wheel interacts into every system that I see out there. So
my Awakened Alchemy course inside uses the medicine wheel as perfect. It pertains for the soulpreneur, because, the visionary journey, it's the hero's journey, which is the medicine wheel in itself. So
exactly.
That was a download given to me by my higher guidance before I even really knew the medicine wheel. And then when I started to research it, I was like, oh, wow, I'm totally tapping into nature's guidance.
Exactly. Cool. So we got the east. It shows up. And then we shift our perspective around the medicine wheel to the south. Its color is predominantly red. It means the warrior. It means having action and power. And this is an action state, right? If you like, this is when the warrior picks up his sword and goes out building an empire, right? This is the act of getting stuff done, right? This is the act of, I am, and doing your very best to manifest through action those dreams and seeds that got planted back in the east, right? It's not much different than, you planted seeds in the east and now you're trying to keep them alive and power them to grow, but it's not quite harvest time yet, right? For sure. And so we have this southern scenario, and so it's again about this juice and this energy and this power and the strength, and it doesn't have to be as well. So often we default to this patriarchal version of strength, and it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be that kind of strength. There's so much different kinds of strength that are available to each one of us, right? When it's about finding out who we are and how we show up and who and what we can, how we can use that power appropriately. I had an Anishinaabe chief, Kini. He was the 7th generation chief of chiefs of the Anishinaabe people. Guy took him half an hour to introduce himself technically. But he taught me very clearly that the appropriate use of power is to use that power. You know, 'cause he caught me playing small in a couple situations, and he says, "No, you're not playing big enough. You're not really stepping up. You got juice, man, and I'm seeing you play small, and you're letting people down because of it." Yeah, you know, and it's interesting. So, you know, this is that time when we find our juice, but we also learn how to apply it, right? You know, for sure, and you know, finding the balance in that, right? You know. So then we shift from the south, and the medicine wheel continues around the circle to the west. And the west is about that kingship. It's about that sovereignty. It's about that. It's, you know, you're past the night. You know, I was saying you've already created this empire. You've got a throne. Oh my goodness! You know, so many kings, of course, step into the throne thinking that it's going to be all, you know, get, you know, harems and fed grapes and, you know, etc. But in a very short amount of time, they realize that they're in service to the throne, right? Yeah, you know, for sure. And they're actually, and a true king that has any merit or any long-standing, you know, dynamics, it recognizes they're in service of the kingdom, of the people, and leans in and learns the power of that, right? You know, for sure. You know, yes, you know, if you're the king, you've got this juice, but again, it boils down to the appropriate use of that power. Right? You know, for sure. And so it's very interesting how we flex and, you know, having to exert our will on the world around us, because even as a king, you get to decide, is it going to be a, you know, democracy or, you know what I'm saying, or how's this going to go down, right? So, you know, you get to kind of decide that stuff, like we see in our governments, you know, these days, right? You know, for sure, for better or for worse, they're different in every kind of country you go to, right? So, you know, for sure. And, you know, so even if it says democracy, it could be a different flavor everywhere you go, depending on the king, right? You know, and the needs of the people more specifically, right? You know?
It does.
And so we have this kingship, and at some point you get sovereign, you get independent, and you realize, you know, that there's so much power and sustainability, I guess, at the end of the day, in being a team player. You know, and this is about applied knowledge and applied wisdom, and you might even start teaching a little bit of some of that to your people around you, right? You know, for sure. Then we step completely into the north, and this is the dynamic of the elder. You know, its color is white, you know, the elder's hair, if you like, you know, and this is that place of teaching, teachers. This is that place of wisdom and awareness and understanding and, you know, the great mystery even, you know, it's interesting because you can even look at this in an academic dynamic. You got your bachelor's first, you know, then you have your, you know what I'm saying, your doctorate, and then you get your PhD, right? You know, and so while you're the bachelor, you know, your certification, you have a little bit of information that you're applying to the world. When you're a master's, of course, and you're a doctor, then you're actually skillful at applying, you know, that knowledge and that dynamic, and you're prepared to flex those skills just a little bit. Whereas when you step into eldership, it's like PhD. And the PhD are ultimately the people who know that topic or know that industry or know that dynamic so well that they're supposed to play with it a little bit. You know, the elder is the one who is supposed to figure out that blue and yellow together make a green crayon, right? You know, because no one else played with it yet that way, right? You know?
Right.
And so it's the elder's job to experiment and to experience and to express. And they've always got their one eye on the youth, because part of the elder's job is to make sure that the future generation has a voice, because they're always going to come into this world and be met with the king. Met with the warrior, right? You know, and so it's this elder's job to also balance temperance, you know, and keep that medicine wheel flowing and keep it, you know, because they've got the wisdom to do so, right? You know, and so each one of us has that archetype within us always, perpetually. You know, and, you know, I mean, I've even studied psychology, and they've got sanguines and cholerics, and I mean, they've got all these different terms and labels and, you know, stuff, but that's all boiling down to exactly the same thing, which is ultimately these archetypes we have within us. Even the tarot cards have their 4 cards, right?
Yes.
And you got your wands and your cups and your swords and your pentacles, which is still within the basis of those 4 archetype dynamics, right? For sure.
And the 4 quadrants, the emotional, mental.
Exactly. It's all there. Yeah. Body, mind, spirit, soul. Exactly. It's
all there.
So this same mentality can be applied to almost any medicine that we're trying to apply to our world. And I think so. What's also valuable is that these teachings are found in every culture, red and yellow, black and white. Yeah, totally.
Well, and what I did find on my journey is that, because I work with the medicine wheel, that really came to me intuitively, and I'm an investigator, so of course I researched what I was seeing and picking up, and it is found, like you said, you went to a different part of the world and it was a medicine wheel, but it was done a little bit differently. This isn't our knowledge. It isn't knowledge that somebody came up with and now everyone all across the world is doing it. These are tribes are doing this without having access to internet and has been going on for thousands and thousands of years, because this is the cycle that we are in, and it can be applied to almost everything that you encounter in life. And just like you said, talking about the tarot deck, what came to me was that within that quadrant, you have the different phases. So here we go with what's happening on the micro is happening on the macro, in all sorts of different directions. And sacred knowledge, universal knowledge.
You know what? And it's interesting, and I not to play devil's advocate here, but there's also something to be said for the contamination of having access to, like, a Lakota elder, sitting around the fire one day, we were talking about, how there's these different teachings, tobacco, for example, all over North America, Sundance is all over North America, and all this stuff. And, that Sioux Lakota elder was very clear that, to be honest, few of that stuff existed up here in Canada, Thunderbird country, right? Until we were able to share the stories, until we were able to jump on a plane, from down there in Lakota country and end up in Coast Salish country and start sharing some of the teachings. But there was concern from that elder about the dynamic of those teachings potentially getting watered down, right? So, having a relationship, for example, with peyote, and you're not from peyote country, may not necessarily be a service to you or peyote, right? So, and so it's a very interesting dance, isn't it? Between knowing the too much and it's just very interesting.
This is a great conversation, because what just came to me when you said that is this is why there are certain sacred plant medicines that you work with according to that region.
Correct.
So, in the jungle, it's ayahuasca, but you meet the shamans over in Siberia. They're not doing that. They are using a hallucinogenic to kind of either do their journeys, do their ceremonies, that type of thing. But it's not the same plant.
Well, actually, you're actually talking about my ancestors, and you are talking about the Sky Amanita mushroom, which is actually the story of Santa Claus, right? Yeah, for sure, right? So technically, I'm a genetic descendant of Santa Claus, right? Is the best way to put that. Because the true story of the Sky Amanita, I'm going to break this down real fast, okay? If this is such a cool story, your listeners are going to love it. Okay, imagine reindeer digging in the snow because they really like those mushrooms, okay? And these are the mushrooms that are red with white buttons on them, okay? Do not ingest them raw or recklessly because they can kill you, okay? But the reindeer can get in there and eat them, and they love them because it makes them high. Well, it might make them fly, quote unquote, just like Santa's reindeer, okay? So what'll happen is the shaman, who's wearing this red jacket with these white buttons on it, is going to get in there and shoo the reindeer away so he can harvest these mushrooms and place them out of reach on the tree that's always present, and it's always an evergreen tree. If you're a mycologist and you're a mushroom hunter, you know that you can validate the species of mushroom based upon the tree that's growing under. There's always a relationship that way, okay? You know, and so whenever you find
they're their own community, it's got the
exactly.
it's
You're not wrong. You're
brilliant.
not wrong at all.
Brilliant.
Exactly. And so we got this Sky Amanita mushroom, basically harvested and put on the tree to dry just a little bit. Before it's done, you got this whole forest full of these trees that are decorated, right? With this red and this white and this little bit of snow and, Christmas tree, right? At some point, he'll load up his sleigh, literally, because snow, right? With a reindeer that pulls it, because that's how it's done, and fills his sack with all of these mushrooms. He will then go from home to home at a specific date. Now, keep in mind, when you live in a yurt and the snow is 20 feet tall, the only way in and out is through the roof. So you got reindeers on the roof. You've got these gifts being passed down to the people below, who then hang them on the fire next to the fireplace to complete the drying process. Right? So, it's just like hanging stockings on the fire, right? So, for sure. So you got this whole Christmas thing going on. At some point, and typically it was December 21st, actually, the longest night.
Yule.
The family would engage in this process that may technically last 3 days, right? So, and yes, to a varying degree, everybody in the family participates, right? And it's this opportunity to utilize that darkness in a sacred way and to, make plans and growth and breakthroughs. And mushrooms are amazing for health, PTSD, and all sorts of, stuff, right? You can take that mushroom and through the old family secrets, which Oma taught to me, through the old family secrets, you can actually create a substance that you can, of course, feed to the whole family, should you choose to go in that direction in a healthy, safe way. The other way is to follow the reindeer around, because when the reindeer eats it and the mushroom gets processed through their kidney, liver, all that stuff, you can actually catch that urine that comes out the other end and drink that eggnog. Right? For sure. And so I share this because there are so many stories, myths, legends. Excalibur has way more to do with a substance called ormus than most people would even possibly understand, right?
Talk about that.
and it's a Star Nation scenario. Those 12 Knights of the Round Table are actually 12 different species that contributed to our genetic experiment that ended in December 21st, 2012. Back when nothing happened, lots happened.
Yes.
The Star Nation, ancient alien teachings are very clear about this evolution that we're experiencing right now. And again, the stories like Excalibur and Merlin and all of that stuff are all about these stories that have truth buried in them. But of course, they aren't obvious truth, right? And they've been maybe twisted a little bit, and, most of our Christian holidays are actually pagan holidays that have just been, one-upped, if you like. Yes. Totally. And
it's either close to it, tied into it energetically. There's resemblance there. The rituals are there.
Right.
I've been watching a show about America, and it got into Freemasonry, and it was showing just a clip of the videos of prominent figures in people who have shaped United States government being Freemasons, and they were putting a brick down one of the corners for something that they were building, and they were doing the wine and the oil and the corn. And they were like, well, yeah, it's not, it's just something that we do. And I'm like, it's right. As soon as I saw it, I was like, I understand what the corn means. I get what the oil means. I get what the wine means. And they're doing it in front of everybody. It's been there all along. And they do it for a specific reason. There's a reason why we do rituals.
Absolutely.
In certain energies. Right. And it all goes back to the intention of the person.
Well, that's just it. Exactly. This is what to say that, ceremony and ritual doesn't have to be nefarious, right?
Right.
To be honest, a big portion of cities that are in the U.S. are built upon sacred geometry. Right, and some Masonic teachings and stuff. In Canada, I believe Edmonton's the only city that's built that way. The pyramids and stuff like that, and the traffic circles, and it's all built up according to this specific sacred geometry layout. I'm friends with the engineers, and so And so there is this awareness. What's interesting is that so many of these conspiracy theories are actually conspiracy facts, right? And all you have to do is just a little tiny bit of digging, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean just because you're doing ceremony, in that way, for example, that everything's nefarious about it, right? Not all Masons are, bloodsuckers, if you like, right? Not all Masons are, etc. But there's so much new information that is actually old information coming to fruition that's landing. For example, these days I'm dancing with this flat earth thing, right? Like the scientist in me has been completely convinced that it's a flat earth, right? But yet I was programmed into this heliocentric version of the universe, right? And so, sometimes, and this is where I'm at, unless something dramatically changes in the next little while here, sometimes you just have to be able to get out into space, look back and see for yourself, right? Because every portion of whether it's flat earth or round earth has been brought to me by somebody else. I don't have my personal experience with it. If I do have my personal experience with it, is that I don't feel like I'm spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. Does it make sense, right? Or
how do you see it dimensionally?
Well, oh yeah, you see, that's the whole dynamic, because
that's how I've seen it, which it's not flat, but it is kind of flat because I can see the different layers, just how it's shown in ancient pictures.
Correct.
And that's what I thought that they were saying when it was flat earth. And I was like, okay, well, I can consciously put that together. Physically, I don't quite know, because I feel like we're projecting our reality. So how am I going to trust what my reality is if they are programming us for it to be round or flat, or it could be square. It could be shaped it could be liquid for all I know. But I know that for the reality that I am projecting currently right now, I don't know if it's flat to me. I mean, I can walk in my driveway and it's flat.
Correct. And so it boils down then to personal experience in that dynamic, right? I have an experience. I don't feel like I'm upside down when I'm on the other end of the world. Does it make sense, right? I don't feel that, but I don't have the experience of being able to step outside the forest to see the trees, right? For sure. Everything else is coming in from someplace else, and I either have to swallow it, accept it, or discount it. If I have no other measuring tool, what I have no ability even to reject information that's coming in. That's new information, right? If you come up to me and say, hey, listen, my daughter's all purple, I can't argue it. Does it make sense? I have to, in that moment, get to a place of my brain creates this little peptide, this little belief system, this little piece of information that, hey, you know what? I think her daughter's purple. I don't know for sure, but I've heard that, and then it gets carried out of control, right? For sure. And so
that's that mind chatter that goes on.
Totally. And not just your mind chatter, but, I turn to someone next to me and say, hey, do you hear her daughter's purple? And the answer might come back with, well, maybe not quite purple. Maybe she's more blue. You know what I'm saying? And that's just because she heard it, or they heard it from somebody else. And, say, next thing we have a thing, right? For sure.
Yes.
This is actually a really powerful tool going on these days. That's just significant. And it's actually a reoccurring psyop, if you like. Like I'm sure you just like, so many other people are aware of the bear conversations these days. The men and bears and all that stuff. Anyway, would you go into the woods with a bear or what have you? But
yeah,
to be honest, it's all actually something called atrocity propaganda, and it's old Nazi stuff. Seriously, it's when you actually see how information is used and dispersed and even cajoled, right? The subtleties of psychology as information is released, right? This is old stuff. And so everybody on the planet needs to know, man and woman, Martian or otherwise, that we are absolutely in the smack dab in the middle of it. This is the weapons. This is the war we're experiencing here right now. And at the end of the day, where they want to plant the flag is in your mind, right?
It's psychology.
For sure. Totally.
Right after I had my awakening, that was the first thing that I dove into was psychology. And I had experience because I was in doctor's office like most of my life because they were misdiagnosing me for all sorts of things that I know are not issues now or is anything else, but just me tapping into my gifts or not fully understanding, embracing my shadow, whatever it is, because it can be a multitude of things.
Totally.
But it is the psychology. They understand this amazing piece of machinery that sits in between our ears.
Yeah.
That most people don't use because common sense is a gift these days.
What's been programmed out of you, right? That common sense, that critical thinking. That's what school does, is kind of numbs that muscle, right?
Has numbed it out. It is completely psychological. I came across something with the bear thing, and when I was like, what is this? And when I watched it, I was like, oh, do we not have anything else better to do? Like we're going to do. But I see that happening a lot on social media. Another one that happened.
And once this one's over, they've got the next 6 already backed up and ready to present, right? And so this is going to be commonplace. This is going to be, the way of it. In my world, how I remain balanced in that is I actually talk to my neighbors. Right. I actually talk to my family. I'm saying, rather than talking to everybody else on the internet, I'm actually checking into my life. How am I doing today? Is there a threat? Is there as soon as you turn on the TV or this computer or what have you, got all this information coming at you that talks about this newest, baddest threat, right?
Yes.
And yet, this morning I spent time making sure that my radishes were, doing just fine in the garden, right? And there was no threat there. I'm saying, although there has been a skunks, kind of poking around. I might have to do something about that, right? For sure. But again, so often it's about living in the now, living in the moment. Worry and fear are projections of something that could or may not happen in your future. And it's a complete waste of this imagination. It's a complete waste of our energetics. The future's a mystery and the past is history. So live in the now because it's present, right? The old cliche.
It is. And it all goes into the medicine wheel again.
Exactly.
One of the things that I am currently working on, and I'll just say where I've been at. I've had something that has affected me traumatically that I have been working through. And what I noticed was that my body now, it was an incident to where it triggered fight or flight, but I couldn't do fight or flight, so I had to freeze. Now, I'm glad for this experience because that is a learned mechanism that I did when I was a child because I couldn't fight or flight. So I've been basically kind of working myself out of what's called a functional freeze.
Yep.
But when I go back to me not being in balance, I'm doing the same thing in my teaching. What David's talking about is I'm checking my medicine wheel on this area is not balanced. This isn't this. And it's because of my physical. Well, when you get into functional freezes, goes into like your, you have too much cortisol. Okay. There's parts of your brain, your reptilian brain is starting to shut down, which is going to shut down other parts in your body. So then you may start getting fatigue and all this.
You're so right. As a matter of fact, I don't mean to interject you here, but the fight or flight mechanism of a reptilian brain is completely and directly connected through our diaphragm and down into our lower portions of our body, specifically the divine feminine, the Holy Grail within ourselves. It's actually a muscle called the psoas, P-S-O-A-S, okay?
Nice.
And so breath work, reptilian brain, psoas, hips, all of this stuff is completely connected. Absolutely. There is we're not a pile of bricks, right?
Yes.
And so you were so on the right track here, which takes us to the place where technically then, by working the diaphragm appropriately, you can have a medicine that can address, we're talking firsthand, the reptilian brain, because they're directly connected. You don't have to try and come from the outside. You can actually from the inside out with just changing your breath, and it might just be as simple as take a breath,
It is.
just take a breath, honest to goodness, then make a decision, right? Or a perception or what have you, right? That living in the now moment is so going to feed that as well, right?
It is. Well, what triggered that was, you talking about the social media. It's important, guys, for you to notice that, because, most people who gravitate to what I say or are on this journey has, in one shape, had a traumatic experience, had a fucked up childhood, whatever. And we're breaking through that, and we're learning how to heal. This was a whole new level of things that were coming up to me, but I started getting into that awareness and paying attention to what social media was doing, triggering those reactions, triggering those emotions. So then it's first thing in the morning, don't get on your phone, because that's the time that if I immediately jump on my phone, who knows what's going to pop up first. Could make your day, could piss you off. But then if it's a pissed off mode, you go into aggravation, and then your body's like that all day. And I've learned most of the stuff that I had in my handbag that I pull out as a tool, goes out the window. I get in the car, 2 minutes in traffic. I'm not spiritual at all, and I have to ask myself, I'm like, what is going on in my body? Which in human design, it's out of the mind and into the body. Your body's going to tell you first what's happening in your environment and let you know everything else if you start to listen to it.
I agree.
It's listening to that body, and that goes into the psychological stuff that they purposely put out there to trigger these subtle responses. Some of them are major. A lot of them you're not even noticing is happening.
Correct. And it just accumulates. Right. So 1 centimeter at a time, you're going to create an inch, and then a foot, and then
until someone out there does a TikTok video and talks about something like functional freeze, and then you put the two together. We're using it against them, which is a beautiful thing, but they also, use it for not so good things.
Totally. Well, I mean, every tool is just that, right? Guns don't kill people. People kill people with guns, right? So,
yes.
And so, I mean, everything can be a weapon, and everything can be a medicine, right? So, it depends how it's applied, for sure. Well,
David, I know you are a busy man. Do you have anything else you would like to add? I could talk to you for.
Oh, geez. And feel free to invite me back.
Yes.
People track me down on social media if you want. I do not answer any friend requests without a, hey, how are you? I just think it's all, I just immediately dismiss it, right? So if you're going to make an outreach to me, make sure that you say, hey, how are you? I saw you here, kind of an idea. Feel free to track me down. I got a lot going on. Ultimately, right now, my job, my destiny, my purpose is to help humanity through this age of trends. Basically, we're evolving. And at the same time as this evolution/revolution is taking place, I recognize it's my job, because I was born that weird kid with all this psychic awareness, to help other people understand what they're stepping into. As those filters get removed and people grow past them, bottom line is, when you crawl out of a caterpillar, cocoon, and you got these, butterfly wings, you're not quite sure what to do with them, give me a shout. Right. I'll teach you how to run those things in such a powerful, good way. This is, honest to goodness, the Super Bowl for humanity. This is the best and the most amazing time to be alive in this dimension, in this universe, on this planet. At this time, it doesn't get any more amazing. The uncomfort and discomfort that you're experiencing, the fear, all that stuff, and the changes, and all of that stuff that seems so oppressive and so it's by design, because humans don't necessarily grow or pushed for growth unless there's some stress to motivate that. And that's just a historical human consequence, for sure. And so there's a lot of stress, and there's more stress coming. But eventually what's going to happen is you're going to realize that enough is enough, and you're going to stretch, and those butterfly wings are going to show up, like I said, and you're going to start hearing things, knowing things, connecting in dimensional ways that maybe 5 years ago you thought we were just a bunch of kooks, but now you're experiencing it. And so I'm the guy you're going to want to talk to. I wrote the books, and I got the teachings, and I know how to get you into your fullest potential, whatever that is. Yeah, for sure. So I guess that's my message.
Yes, thank you. And everyone will be able to find your links in the description. And if you can't find David and you want to chat with him, you guys know where to find me. I can definitely connect the two. I highly recommend. David, you've been a key person on my journey. I came across you right shortly after I had my awakening.
Awesome.
And
here we are. That's so. It's to me, I am thrilled. To see that I had an impact in someone's life that is now having an impact in others. Yeah, like that to me is the ultimate reward, right? As an author, I got to tell you, the biggest compliment I ever heard was I had this teenage girl show up with this ragtag, beat up, barely legible, pages falling out, one of my books. And her mom says, I caught her actually reading it under the covers and teeing and all this stuff. And she says, will you sign my book? You autograph it. And I went, are you kidding me? Look what you've done to this poor book. She says, I hope you don't mind. I lent it to some friends. And I went, oh my God, I gifted her a brand new book, with the best autograph ever, right? Because what a compliment. Right. And so
that means she really tore into your material.
Totally.
That's the best review.
So Jennifer, thank you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for shining so bright. Thank you for showing up, because not everybody is, right? And you know what, if I had just a little bit to do with that, and you're suggesting I did, then you know what, that makes me feel pretty good about me. And it certainly empowers me to continue my journey, because there's another Jennifer I got to meet tomorrow. Right. So, totally.
Thank you for that. You did. And you still do. You still do.
Oh, yeah. Keep stalking me. It's going to get weirder yet. Trust me.
Well, we're definitely going to have you back on the show. I really appreciate you. And thank you again for everything that you are doing for the collective. And for being on this journey with me. Can't wait to see what's coming, because that's what we came here for.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning into the show. You know the drill. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and follow, and drop your comments down below. Tag me in a post, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye now. Thank you for tuning into The Balanced Visionary. I hope this episode has brought you valuable insights and inspiration. If it resonated with you and you feel like you can light up someone else's day too, please take a moment to screenshot, share, and tag me on Instagram. I love seeing your posts and getting to know you better on a personal level. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. Join us next time as we continue our journey towards aligning ambition with soulful success. Until then, keep balancing, keep dreaming, and I'll see you in our next visionary encounter.